One of the most comforting beliefs a person can have is the idea that responsibility can be transferred. That if you follow orders, respect rules, and stay within your role, whatever happens is no longer truly yours. Hannah Arendt dismantled this belief with brutal clarity. She argued that obedience does not erase responsibility. On the contrary, it often hides it. And the more people rely on obedience as a shield, the more dangerous their actions become. Responsibility feels heavy, and many people spend their lives trying to avoid it. Obedience offers an escape. When someone else decides, judges, and commands, you are relieved of having to think. You can tell yourself that you are just a part of something larger, that your role is small, that your intentions do not matter because the decision was not yours. Arendt believed this logic is one of the greatest moral traps of modern society. The problem is that responsibility does not disappear when it is delegated. It only becomes harder to see. Arendt observed that people involved in harmful systems rarely see themselves as responsible because they focus on their immediate task rather than the outcome. They fill out forms, enforce rules, follow procedures, and move on. Each action feels minor. Each step feels justified. But together, these small actions create consequences no one wants to fully own. What makes this so unsettling is that obedience often feels moral. It is associated with discipline, duty, and respect. Disobedience, on the other hand, is framed as reckless or selfish. Arendt challenged this framing completely. She argued that morality does not come from loyalty to orders, but from judgment, from the ability to ask whether an action is acceptable regardless of who requested it. Arendt believed that the most dangerous phrase a person can say is, "I had no choice." In reality, there is almost always a choice. The choice may be costly, it may be uncomfortable, it may involve risk. But denying its existence is itself a moral decision. When people convince themselves they had no choice, they silence the inner dialogue that makes responsibility possible. The climax of Arendt's insight is simple and devastating. Even if you obey, you remain responsible. Even if the action is legal, you remain responsible. Even if everyone else is doing it, you remain responsible. Responsibility is not something that can be outsourced to authority, systems, or the majority. It is inseparable from action itself. This idea is deeply uncomfortable because it removes all safe places to hide. You cannot disappear into a role. You cannot dissolve into a hierarchy. You cannot point upward and absolve yourself. Arendt insisted that every individual remains accountable for what they do precisely because they are capable of thinking. To act without thinking is not innocence, it is negligence. What allows people to live with themselves after causing harm is often not justification, but distance. Distance from consequences, distance from victims, distance from reflection. Arendt warned that modern systems are exceptionally good at creating this distance. They fragment responsibility so effectively that no one feels fully involved. But fragmentation does not erase responsibility, it multiplies it. The tragedy is that many people sense this truth, but suppress it. They feel moments of doubt, discomfort, and unease. But instead of exploring these feelings, they silence them. They remind themselves of rules, expectations, and consequences. Obedience becomes a way to avoid inner conflict. But that avoidance comes at a price. Over time, the capacity to judge weakens. Arendt believed that responsibility begins with the refusal to lie to oneself. To admit that following orders does not remove moral weight. To acknowledge that participation is still participation, even when enthusiasm is absent. Silence, compliance, and passivity are not neutral positions. They are choices with consequences. The modern world makes this realization even harder. Speed leaves little room for reflection. Bureaucracy disguises harm as process. Language softens reality. Words like policy, protocol, and procedure replace words like suffering and damage. Arendt saw this as a deliberate danger. When language becomes abstract, responsibility becomes easier to deny. But the human cost does not disappear simply because it is hidden. Responsibility remains, waiting to be acknowledged. And when it is not, it does not vanish. It accumulates. It shapes societies, institutions, and individuals in ways that cannot be undone easily. Arendt believed that the refusal to accept responsibility is how ordinary people become part of extraordinary harm. This is why thinking is inseparable from responsibility. Thinking forces individuals to confront the meaning of their actions. It removes the comfort of excuses. It asks whether obedience is enough to justify what is being done. And once that question is asked honestly, there is no returning to ignorance. Arendt did not suggest that everyone must constantly rebel. Her demand was more demanding than rebellion. She demanded honesty. The honesty to admit that obedience does not absolve, that legality does not equal morality, that normality does not equal innocence. This honesty is difficult because it requires people to carry the weight of their actions rather than handing it off. The most dangerous societies are not those where people openly choose evil, but those where people stop seeing themselves as responsible at all, where obedience replaces judgment, where roles replace conscience, where people believe that as long as they follow instructions, they are safi. Arendt showed us that this belief is an illusion. If this reflection feels heavy, it is because it is meant to be. Responsibility is not comfortable, but it is human. Hannah Arendt believed that accepting responsibility, even when it is painful, is what prevents evil from becoming effortless. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think people today use obedience as an excuse to avoid responsibility? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this video made you rethink what responsibility really means, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Because obedience may feel safe, but responsibility can never be avoided.